Since I promised last time that we're going to have a new segment on our channel, which is the Hero Spotlight, here is the very first hero that all of you who were on our previous live stream have voted to be the very first hero featured in the Hero Spotlight. Okay, and finally, of course, we are talking about Zhao Yun, who is now in the game for a while, and he is also one of the most anticipated heroes for Season 6. And we are going to talk all about Zhao Yun. So, we're going to talk about his hero skills, hero builds, sync, or hero compositions for other heroes, which or where to put him in a lineup, and the rings and gems that is usable or that is applicable on Xiaoyun based on the builds. And we're also going to talk about what are the possible mounts or the possible adornments that you can use on Xiaoyun. Before anything else, slap that like button and drag this video out to your friends. And since 78% of you guys watching are not yet subscribed to the channel, I encourage you to do so. We also have our tip link here on screen. You can leave a message or comment on that so I can answer or recognize your message on our next video. We now have our super chat and super thanks, and if you want to be a member of the channel, you can get perks like custom icons, custom emotes, and enjoy members only content. And with that, let's go back to topic. Now, Zhao Yun is actually one of the heroes that they said was really going to bring up the change in the Lubu lineup. Well, some of them are true and some of them are not. Some have been anticipating the hero and was disappointed, and some are anticipating the hero and was really, really satisfied with how Zhao Yun delivered in the battlefield. Now, we're going to talk about Zhao Yun, but first, let's see his talent trees. So right now, here are the talent trees that you can use on your Zhao Yun. If you want to use my build here, you can do so. If you want a different build, I may say it depends on the situation, but you must only change mostly the attacks or also the mights here in the process if you want to change anything. That's all that I can say. We're going to talk about first the commander skill and the signature skill. Now on your commander skill, Zhao Yun deals might damage to an enemy troop. This is going to be a single target. Now, the damage rate is at 240% at max. Smite bonus can deal critical strike, which is really, really good. And this one applies one stack of the Cloud Dragon Mark for 15 seconds, while reducing damage taken by your troop by 8% with additional might bonus for 6 seconds. And it also grants 100 initial rage upon entering the battle. Now, one thing I want to share with you guys is the first thing that I look for a commander is he should have at least an extra initial rage upon entering the battle, which is number 1. And since your Zhao Yun has one of that, so Zhao Yun for me can be a commander depending on your build. Now, also another one that the players are anticipating using Zhao Yun is actually this 8% damage reduction, because we all know the Lubu lineup is a little bit lacking on defense, but Timur has, on the other hand, changed that since his arrival, and right now, Zhao Yun is possibly the second to give this lineup a damage reduction. And with this reason that Zhao Yun is also considered as a commander. So next up, we're going to talk about the signature skill. Now, Zhao Yun's signature skills states that after any of your heroes activate a secondary strike skill, which Lubu possess on most of his customizable skills, and his ring skill, if you are using the Ring of Daisy, this one applies one stack of Cloud Dragon Mark to the enemy troops for 15 seconds. Now, once you have 3 stacks, consume all the Cloud Dragon marks applied by your troop and deals might damage. And the damage rate is at 240% with might bonus and also can deal critical strike. Now, do not forget that this is not a secondary strike skill, but rather a passive skill that your Zhao Yun possesses. Meaning, if you're going to use a gem on your Zhao Yun for your Valiant Rescue, if you want this to be the main focus of your damage, you can use a passive skill gem. Now, additionally, has a 60% chance to make Zhao Yun and the next hero to enter the double attack state for 3 seconds, which gives you already the idea that Zhao Yun's position in the lineup is actually vital for its success. Now, this skill has a 12% base critical strike rate, which makes Zhao Yun really, really important, and which will give you considerations on which other heroes you need to really bring into your lineup. Now, increases also a critical strike damage of all the heroes, so by 10%, and critical strike rate by 15%. So these are both important in this lineup, especially if you are using a Lubu and a Timur. And additionally, this skill reduces critical strike damage taken by your troop by 15%. As you all know, the warrior cabs are not the sole critical damage dealer in the game anymore. Now, this is actually where you're going to think through about these skills or how you build your gems, because these skills reduces damage dealt by the customizable secondary strike skills learned by Zhao Yun by 30%, and that is a significant number right there. And this one also increases the trigger chance, though, on the other hand, by 5%. So you really need to think through on what customizable skills you want for your Xiaoyun and what gems you really want to build for your Xiaoyun. Talking about that, let's now go to your stars. The stars of your Xiaoyun is really, really important for you to consider if you are going to put him, or if you are going to max him, or you will let him stay on rank 3. Now, the first rank of your Xiaoyun gives you an increased Valiant Rescue's damage rate by 40% and critical strike damage of all your heroes by 10%, which is already shown in the signature skills that we talked about earlier. Now, for the rank 2 and rank 4, it only gives you stats, which gives you first on the rank 2, increases your troop damage by 2.5, and on the rank 4, increases now your reduction to troops damage taken by 2.5%. Now, the critical part of this hero is the third rank. This one gives you Valiant Rescue additional increase in the critical strike rate, which has a vital importance in the Might Cavalry heroes. This one increases critical strike rate of all your heroes by 15% and reduces the critical strike damage by your troop by 15%, which, as I've said, is already included in the signature skill. Now, this is where you want to decide if you want to go further to rank 5. But for me, if you are a free-to-play player or a low spender, rank 3 is really not that bad. It's actually decent. And you only want to go to rank 5 in case you are a whale, a kraken, or you really want your Zhao Yun to be your primary commander. Now this, because rank 5 increases the Valiant Rescue's double attack chance by additional 40%, which is really, really good even if Zhao Yun is not your commander. Because you will have an assurance that the next hero after Zhao Yun will have a double attack. Now next, when Zhao Yun is the commander, take note, each normal attack has a 45% chance to recover 5 rage, which is very important if you are a Zhao Yun commander. Because as I've said, Zhao Yun's commander skill will give you an extra Cloud Dragon mark, which is important to trigger his signature skill, and triggering his signature skill will trigger a lot of other chain reaction skills for your whole troop, which is very, very important. That is why if you are a Might Cavalry user, you might want to consider maxing him up to 5-star. And triggering the commander skill earlier and more frequently in the process will give you more and more chance to have damage reduction after getting your Wild Dragon, which is your commander skill. As I've said, as we have talked about earlier, from his signature skill, the customizable skills are actually going to have a 30% decrease in damage, but will have 5% more trigger chance. Now, for me, the Dragon Manifestation is a very important skill for your Zhao, may it be secondary strike skill or not. Because this skill, particularly after normal attack, alternates between these two effects, which in my opinion is a good thing. First, it increases the activation chance of all your heroes' customizable secondary strike skill by an extra 5% for 6 seconds. It means that it will trigger the Dragon Manifestation, again, with an additional 5%, which will make this 40%, plus the 5% from your signature skill, which makes this 45%. In other words, it can trigger 1 in every 2 normal attacks. Now, the next one is it immediately uses the other customizable secondary strike skill, which is very alluring for a player who really loves spamming skills, which applies in this situation. Now, this one excludes the Signet Ring skills, which, as I've said, if you are a Lubu user, your Daisy Ring is a secondary strike skill damage. That's why it is included in the critical damage and considered as a customizable skill for your Lubu. Also, the thing is, after immediately uses the other customizable secondary strike skill, which mirrors the skill of Judgment from Lagerta, it, in a way, also reduces the damage by 15% because Lagerta's skill now, on the other hand, reduces the damage by, I think, 30%. So I think they have a little bit of similarity in a way. Now that you know what Dragon Manifestation is actually going to give you, you can now think of the next skill that you want to add in this scenario. For example, we have the Dark Flag here. Given the scenario, this is also a 35% activation chance. Let's say it's going to be now 45%. Let's just say that it is 45%. Let's just assume. After launching a normal attack, increases the might of your hero with the highest might by 110. Let's say your highest might hero is Lubu, for example. 110 might is actually almost an overkill if you are a Lubu user, because Dark Flag will always be there giving your Lubu that 110 might. And also reduces the armor of the enemy hero with the highest armor by 100, which will give your opponent a little bit of disadvantage because of the less armor. Now, this effect lasts for 6 seconds, and in that 6 seconds, you can trigger another Dark Flag. The only downside of a Dark Flag, though, is you won't have any damage per the skill. But as I've said, the signature skill removes or reduces 30% secondary strike skill damage of your customizable skills. That is why it doesn't really matter if you use the Dark Flag, because the 30% reduction of damage won't really affect the Dark Flag. Comparing your Dark Flag now with your critical insight first. So with your critical insight, you will increase all your heroes' critical strike rate by 14%. When dealing a critical strike, reduces all enemy heroes' armor by 15 up to 3 stacks, which means your enemy heroes are going to have 45 armor per hero. If you're going to use the critical insight number 1, it won't have the 30% damage reduction from your signature skill, and on the other hand, giving you extra critical strike rate, which gives, for example, your Timur and your Lubu the advantage when you have the critical insight. Now, you can actually picture this already in your mind on how things work with your customizable skills. Now, on the other hand, let me tell you now something that is, I think, will give you another doubt in your mind that you have actually 3 good skills here that will really benefit you depending on your situation. Give me your attention here in Pay in Blood. This one is a secondary strike skill, no doubt about that. Only activation chance, though, is 25%. With the 25% plus the 5% from your customizable skill, Dragon Manifestation, and also your signature skill, it will end up to be 35%. So let's say 1 in 3 normal attacks, this will activate. This, though, deals might damage to the enemy troop by 370%. This one recovers your unit by a recovery rate of 120% plus might bonus, so it means it's going to be even higher. Now, as I've said, you need to think about your Dragon Manifestations effect here. For example, you have used your Pay in Blood. In the process, you will now get, let's say, 35%. Yes, it will also reduce the damage of 30% total damage plus additional 15% total damage with your Dragon Manifestation here. But the use really of your Pay in Blood is actually its recovery rate, plus it may have reduced to almost 45% of damage, but since your Dragon Manifestation can actually trigger this right away again, you can have double the damage and heal from your Pay in Blood, which is, in my opinion, a really, really good addition. And that is how we should look into the Dragon Manifestation with Pay in Blood versus Dark Flag. Now, for example, you have the Critical Insight. A Critical Insight won't really benefit from any of the Dragon Manifestation skills. So if you use the Dragon Manifestation, there are only 2 options. if you are on the late stage, which is Dark Flag and Pay in Blood. Now, if you are on the early stage, you can actually use the Armor Piercer because it also has a damage. It is a secondary strike skill. You can actually do the damage twice. And in the meta right now, having more survivability will actually give you almost every time a guarantee to have more elimination, more points, more survivability. Now let's go to your gems. First off, the gems I want you to get is either on the helm and the first slot of the shoes. The most important thing there is it depends on what the lineup needs. For example, as I've said, I usually use 2 attacks, 1 defense, 4 health or 5 health depending on the situation, plus the remaining are troop capacity. So that's how I do the helmet and the shoes. So as for those of you guys who knows already, the helmet slots for the gems and the first slot in the shoe are unit type of gems, which means that it affects the unit, not the hero. The hero gems here are going to be your gems for your arm and for your body, and the other 2 remaining slots for your shoes. So for the arms, of course, number 1, and I think if you don't have might, the only other option I want you to go to is all attributes. So those are the only 2 gems that I recommend if you are a Xiao Yun. Now, if you are a support Xiao Yun, you can use armor. That is my go-to. For your armor, though, what you can do is to give your Xiao Yun more passive gems. Now, you can use these gems also on your shoes, and it will work really, really well for your Xiao Yun. Now, if you don't have passive gems, this is an example of one of, let's say, the best traits for your Xiao, which includes both Valor and Gallant in one mount, for which really, really helps this hero. Now, the only problem with the mount that I have right now is my Gallant has way higher rarity than my Valor. So, the Valor skills give you passive skill damage or might damage, and the Gallant gives you secondary strike skill might damage. So, as I've said on my previous video about the mounts, the most important thing, number 1, in the mounts are your traits, and secondary is your stats, unless your mounts are legendary and mythical, which will give you a lot of stats for, let's say, your might or your other attributes depending on your pulls. Sometimes it depends really on the situation, but in this situation here, the traits are way important than the stats, especially if you have 2 traits in one mount. Now, as I've said, you can use Valor in this hero as your horse. Or now, what are the traits that you can use for your Xiao Yun? You can use Valor, number 1, for the damage. You can use the critical, since his skills can do critical, especially the passive ones. You can use a critical trait. Also, you can use a normal attack trait, and also you can use Sunder, Army Sunder, which gives you all types of damage increase. And now there are also other traits out there that you can use, but it will only be effective in a solo world battle. So now, the other thing that you can do with your mounts if you are a Xiao Yun user is that you can actually use defensive mounts traits in a support scenario for your Xiao Yun. Adornments wise, you can use Unyielding Iron as your main if you want more damage for your lineup. Or you can use Sacred Lily as an adornment if your Xiao Yun is a support. I recommend 1 to 2 damage adornments only, and for example, you have a Lubu, so one right away for your Lubu, and then 1 right away for your Xiaoyun. You can also do just 1 for your Lubu, then 2 defense adornments for the other heroes. Now, let's say you are using an offensive adornment, which is the Unyielding Iron here. So the special effects that actually can give your Xiaoyun the best value, can use Boiling Blood. It can really, really help, since this one can actually give you recovery, and also increases the secondary strike skill damage also of this hero by this much for 3 seconds, and triggers up to 1 time every 9 seconds, which can help a little bit, but this is not a priority for me. This is just an option. You can use resistance on your Xiaoyun, especially if your Xiaoyun is a support. You can use that one. In a way, you can use a Cloud Piercer, especially if you are on a solo battle. This can actually really help. Also, you can use this in, let's say, the Radiant Sea, because you only have one enemy. You can also use this in the Apex Arena. As long as you are not being attacked by other heroes, it will actually really work on your hero. Now, Shadow Chaser is a go-to, especially for Lubu, but you can also use this on your Xiaoyun. You can actually use Shadow Chaser because this one will give you 65% chance to increase the hero's next skill damage, which doesn't talk about anything about your, it's either your signature skill or customizable skill. As long as it's a skill with a damage, it will grant that percentage of damage on that hero. That is why Shadow Chaser is really also a good choice for your Xiao Yun. So those are my choices for your adornments for your Xiao Yun. Now, we have here only a limited pool for my heroes, but for example, we are using a Xiao Yun as a support. You can use a Lubu as your main, for example, you're using Timur as your support, and you are using a Xiao Yun. You can do this as your lineup, and your Xiaoyun in a way should be a support in this situation. And make sure if you are using this lineup with Timur, the Timur is in the second slot because of his customizable, or because of his signature skill, which is Annihilation Blade, which gives you here the effect when serving as the second in command, you will have reduction a damage reduction taken by your troop by 15%, which is really good. And remember that the 30% damage dealt will only be effective if you are the commander. So next up is, for example, you are using another hero here. For example, you are using a Vlad. So I don't really use a Vlad in this situation. I just want you guys to picture the scenario. So the thing with your Vlad is he doesn't really have any customizable skills sync with this lineup skills. But the Deadly Dragon Thorn is a must on every lineup that your hero is in. You can either do now Battle Roar or Forceful Retaliation depending on your preference. So those are the skills that you can use on your Vlad. Now there is also another build that I recommend for you to use with your Xiaoyun. You can use your Xiaoyun as your commander, but make sure you choose your fights. This lineup cannot actually be Swarm because you're going to have a little bit of disadvantage when it comes to the commander's damage, but you can use a Xiaoyun, Lubu, and Attila. So in this build, you must be a 5-star for me, in my opinion, and you can use a Dragon Manifestation and pay in. You can use Dragon Manifestation and pay in blood in the process so that you can actually activate this more, and your passive skill will actually activate also more. Your Lubu can actually also benefit with this, and although your Lubu will have to sacrifice a little bit of damage, but your Xiao Yun will really be the one that will give you tankiness because of his commander skills and his heal. So if you do not have Timur and you are using this build, make sure your Xiao Yun is your main commander because it will give you defense on the commander skills and then also heal on your pay in blood. So you can also use a defensive adornment here and defensive special effects like resistance. As I've said, the mounts, the gems, and the rings build depends on the lineup that you have and depends on the situation. So that is how it is. So these are the builds for your Attila still. It will not change. Your Lubu also will not change. The only thing that will be flexible should be your Xiaoyun in every lineup. So in this build, these are the builds that you can use if you want to. Now, for example, you do not have a Lubu and you want Xiaoyun. So you want Xiaoyun to be your commander here. For example, you have a Guan Yu here and let's say a Rani here. You can also run this lineup. Also, you can run a Xiaoyun, a Vlad, a Rani. You can also use, or you can also run a Vlad, a Timur, and a Xiaoyun. But this is a this is a very rare build that I don't think no one is actually using this build. But as I said, there is really no limit now in the when it comes to the lineup because we have tons of heroes in the game. But this can also actually work. Now, another thing is if you want your Zhao Yun, for example, you don't now have another hero that will give you, let's say you have a Zhao Yun here, you have Guan Yu here. So since, for example, you don't have a Lubu and a Timur, and you have only a Guan Yu, for example, or an Attila, or a Rani, so this is how you want to actually build it. Now, if you have Attila and Rani only, you can also run it this way, and treat Guan Yu like a Lubu, but it won't really have that much of a thing. Now, if you want more deep dive into the lineups or hybrid lineups that you haven't really seen, you can actually leave a comment down below, and maybe we can talk about builds of these lineups, and maybe we can discover something that is out of the ordinary, which I really love to do. Since we are already here, let's talk rings. So the rings for your Zhao Yun can also be a defensive ring, but I really recommend that you have 2 damage ring on your lineups. That's why I am using the ring of Nightwolf here. And you can also use ring of Deer here if you want to. But the thing is that you need to be a little bit lucky with the ring of Deer, because when if Attila is the one who got the damage, it won't really matter. Now, last thing that we can talk about is actually your mercenaries. Now, we have 3 mercenaries available for your heroes. Now, for me, the Camel Rider is actually a good one if you are using a Lubu as your main commander. Now, if your Zhao Yun is your main commander, Indian Elephant, I think, is the best go-to if you're going to ask me. Hopefully, I did this hero justice by explaining to you guys the skills, the rings, the gems, the mounts, the adornments, the talents, and the builds that you can use on your Zhao Yun. If you have any other questions, recommendations, or suggestions that you want to share with us, kindly leave them all in the comments and we're going to talk about it. Maybe I missed something in a way I can, so that I can correct them if I was wrong with some facts, or maybe I was missing something on the details for your Zhao Yun. So that's the end of our very first hero spotlight here with Zhao Yun. Hopefully you guys have learned something on this video, and hopefully I help you understand the hero and how he can be used in the battlefield. We may not have given you tests on this hero, but my primary priority on the hero spotlight is to share with you guys the understanding of each heroes and why these heroes are being used as a commander or a support, or if there are any alternatives that you can use for these heroes. Like the video, share this one with your friends, and don't forget to give us a subscribe and ring the bell so we'll always be notified as soon as we have a new video just for you guys. And with that, have a great day, squad. This is your TITOBODS, and I will see you in the next one. And hey, click on this video right here for more awesome TITOBODS content. Thanks for watching, you guys, and TITOBODS out.